when you're on your knees
Don't be horrid to me.
and down on your luck.
I had no idea what my life would lead to, or what would be waiting for me around the next corner.
The only way is up.
You have been all I ever desired in a woman.
Andrew Davis's adaptation of the classic Fanny Hill concludes Monday at 9 on BBC 4.
In a moment, you'll be taking a front row seat at the world-famous Wimbledon Grand Slam tennis tournament. But is it real? Or could it all be a computer-generated illusion?
Rob Newman's The History of the World Backwards. New Tuesday comedy, Tuesday at 10 on BBC 4.
Razor-sharp satirical comedy and some strong language now on BBC 4. Recorded earlier, Marcus Brigstocke with The Late Edition.
How lovely to see you. Goodness me. Please, thank you. Well, as fires continue to rage across California, tragic news this evening as veteran actor and pro-gun campaigner Charlton Heston is still alive, despite his house being full of gunpowder. Never has there been a more appropriate time for the California Highway Patrol to be called Chips. Great excitement in Australia today, and not about sport or racism or beating other races at sport. No. The world's largest plane ever landed in Sydney after its maiden voyage. The Airbus A380 is so large, you actually have to take a separate EasyJet flight from the terminal to your seat. Take that, the planet. A spokesman for the organisation Pilots with Tiny Penises refused to comment. A ban on smacking children has been rejected by ministers this week after a review showed that most parents were against it. There are, of course, more effective methods of disciplining a child. Take them to a party and dance near them like this. Raise them Catholic. And there's always the naughty step, which is a large stone slab that you can use to hit them. Good evening, you're watching The Late Edition. Hello, thank you very much. Welcome to the show. We have an excellent programme for you tonight, or at the very least, slightly better than last week's show. I'll be joined by the science editor of the Daily Mail, Michael Hanlon, and by David Cameron's biographer, Joanne Nadler. Now, with most of California being ravaged by fire, the latest reports say that firefighters and police are doing a fantastic job. Although, in fairness, they always say that, don't they? I mean, you very rarely get a report saying there's been a disaster and the emergency services not only arrived late, once they got there, they sat on their asses and laughed like gits. Of course they're doing a great job, apart from the ones who've been sent to Iraq.
Looking forward to going.
Oh, blimey, something happened there. Apart from the ones who've been sent to Iraq, along with all their firefighting equipment. You know, of all the dreadful consequences anyone anticipated of the Iraq War, I don't think even the most pessimistic of us feared that it would threaten Ted Danson's house. Obviously, after Hurricane Katrina, the US administration have been very quick to respond. In fact, if you look at this graph, you can see how the speed of response relates to the number of rich white people affected by the disaster. There's Hurricane Katrina along the bottom line there. President George W. Gump gave a statement to the press yesterday.
Looking forward to going out to California tomorrow.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. That's an appropriate comment right now. Looking forward to it. I hear it's really nice. Warm, you know? Hot. Nice place. But what are they actually going to do about it?
I wish we could control the wind.
I wish we could control the wind. That'd be cool. And the clouds as well. And Dick Cheney. My guess is he will eventually declare a war on fire. The truth is, in the Sunshine State, this is not the sort of thing that people are used to, with the possible exception of their governor and movie hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who gave this emergency statement this morning.
It is really fantastic to be part of all this action there. I can hear all the applause and the excitement, and it is really great, and I hope that you all have a great time.
But, of course, many people have lost their homes. Fortunately, the ever-tasteful Clinton's cards have been very quick to get in on the emerging market with these thoughtful offerings. They have this one, Deepest Sympathy. It's lovely. Inside it said, we were so sorry to have learned that your home's completely burned. Lovely thought. And this one here, they've gone with a sort of mamas and papas theme. California burning. And inside it says, all the leaves are burned and the sky is black. Don't go for a walk if you want to come back. You'd be safe and warm if you weren't in LA. So that's nice. Now, obviously, the BBC has dramatically cut its news budget, but in true Dunkirk spirit, we are able to go live now to our reporter who is there on the scene.
Hello, Marcus.
Hello. Yeah, it looks like things are under control where you are.
Yeah, that's because I'm not in Hollywood.
Right.
I'm actually at a barbecue, 47 Frobisher Lane, Bristol. That's as far west as the BBC could afford to send me.
Is there any point going on with this?
Yes, Marcus, because at any moment this barbecue could ignite the surrounding trees. We could be in a situation very like the one being experienced in Hollywood now as I speak. Imagine that. Our own fire, people running away, quite literally hot.
Yeah. That is pure speculation, of course.
Yes, that's right, Marcus. Speculation, very much the future of news because it delivers value to the licence payer.
Right. And a cheap way of filling airtime.
Yeah. I can speculate that the fire in Hollywood might go on for weeks, months, even years, or could go out today.
It's not very enlightening. Do you have any idea what may have caused the fire?
Almost certainly some other fire. Or possibly a spark, Marcus. The administration are also not ruling the very real possibility out that this wasn't a terrorist act. In fact, nothing is being ruled out at this stage.
Nothing?
Well, irony. It does seem unlikely that these fires were caused by irony. Or orchestrals.
Sorry, hang on a minute. Just looking at that, that's not a real barbecue, is it? And that's a phony backdrop.
Yes, Marcus, it is all faked.
Right. Another bit of deception from the BBC.
Yes, Marcus, but heads will roll.
Right.
Mine, in fact, yeah, this just in, I'm resigning. Bye.
Right, thank you very much. It's been a bleak few days for English sports fans. We lost the rugby, we lost the football, we lost the motor driving grand prize or something, I don't know, it was in French. But it's not all bad when you look at Britain as a whole, and of course, many Europeans do look at Britain as a whole. In terms of teen pregnancy, we're top of the league. And when it comes to fat, wheezy, inert lard arses, we are in the Premiership. We drink like champions, we smoke like Californian houses. For God's sake, even our pets are morbidly obese. Look at that. That is a big fat dog. Well, I'm joined now by a man who wrote this week that many of these doom-laden statistics and predictions are about as accurate as the judgment of the Rugby World Cup final referee when he said that it wasn't a try when it clearly was. So, would you please welcome the science editor of the Daily Mail, Michael Hanlon. Very lovely to have you here. How are you?
I'm fine.
May I start by saying how nice it is to have someone from the Daily Mail. For some reason, they won't come on my show.
I wonder why.
I don't know. It's like, I don't know, there's some tension there. But look, you've written this thing this week. It's Big Fat Fibs. About this whole thing, the obesity epidemic.
There was this report last week. As you said, we're all going to die. We're all getting hugely fat like that poor dog. We're all smoking too much and drinking like fish. And this report came out last week that life expectancy is going to fall. We're all going to, about 50% of us are going to be clinically obese by 2050. That it's going to cost the country £45.5 billion a year to cope with this problem by 2050. And we all, you know, everybody sort of dutifully reported this. And I thought, well, hang on, has anyone actually read this report? I had a look at it, and it was complete cobblers from start to finish. For a start, this figure of 45.5 billion, a very precise-sounding figure. And you look at the report, you say, well, how did you get that figure? And there's things like quality of life. There's a cost to that. And I rang them up and I said, what do you mean by that? And it's things like, you know, if I find it a bit hard to walk up the stairs or chat up somebody in a disco because I'm too fat, is that like 80p or something? How do you work that out?
Is this a cry for help, Michael?
It is. They said, well, it is an inexact science. And I think they sort of hinted I was being a bit facetious. But when you actually look at these reports, what happens is they say, you know, we're all getting fatter, which is true. We're all drinking too much, which is true. But what they do is they commission an army of bureaucrats. A report is commissioned, and before long, we'll have an obesity czar.
I hope he's good and fat.
I hope he is good and fat.
It's the very least you could expect.
But he'll be a very annoying,
czar.
thin person, probably.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. One of the things in your comment I really liked, you said, we are certainly getting drunker. About 15 years ago, this country embarked upon what seems like an endless and quite heroic binge.
It is extraordinary.
Are you much of a drinker yourself?
I occasionally have been known.
Yeah, I mean, clearly you don't think this is too much of a problem. If you'd like some wine, perhaps some crisps and nuts as well.
But we're not allowed any of this anymore.
None of this. Do you think that's a real thing? I mean, people always say that, oh, they'll be taking our food away next and they'll be banning this, that and the other. And I'm never quite sure about that, because...
Well, I mean, we've had the great war on smoking. We're now having the great war on drinking. That's another thing I mentioned there. You know, we agree there is this heroic bender we've been on for the last 15 years. And what, to me, would be very interesting is to answer the question, why? Why do you see so many young people lying on their backs on the streets of Britain covered in vomit?
Well, because they're worried about the obesity epidemic.
They probably are.
And the amount that they're drinking.
Yes.
That's the problem.
But you don't see it in Switzerland or Italy or France, and alcohol's just as cheap there, and there are wealthy people.
I have a suspicion that the Swiss gather these people up and put them somewhere.
They probably melt them down.
I wouldn't be at all surprised. So you really don't think we need to worry about this too much? I mean, the report said by 2050 that 60% of men and 50% of women will be clinically obese.
I think we need to worry. What I'm a little bit sceptical of are reports which put such precise figures on these things. This is the problem. We've commissioned a panel of experts, statisticians, people with fancy letters after their names, and saying, you are going to be, you know, by 2050 there are going to be this many million porkers in Britain. And the fact is we don't know. Lots of assumptions. All fat kids turn into obese adults. Do they? We don't know.
Not necessarily. I was enormous, whereas now I'm only quite big.
Right.
But there are more fat people than there are thin people in the world.
Yes.
Apparently.
Yes.
My guess is the fat ones are eating the thin ones.
The fat ones are eating the thin ones, yes.
I'm not sure, but it could be. So necessarily we needn't worry. I mean, one thing, of course, is that if so many people get fat, given that it's not particularly attractive, they may stop breeding.
That doesn't seem to be happening. Americans are enormous.
The tubbies are getting it on.
If you get within 10 miles of the coast, I mean, people are the size of cars, and yet their population is still going up.
Yeah. OK, all right. Well, so we don't need to worry about that, which is a comfort to me as a cheese fan.
You are indeed.
I love a bit of cheese. Now, another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because you wrote, obviously, Al Gore won the Nobel Prize a week or so ago, and you wrote a piece about that. Sort of questioning the validity of him having won it. Just tell me why.
Well, there's a couple of things. I mean, I've got into trouble in the past about views on global warming, and they have changed over the years. I'm far less sceptical than I used to be. I do think there was a problem with Al Gore and the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, I might just be stupid, but I think the Nobel Peace Prize is about stopping people fighting each other.
Yeah, but they are. You know, in Sudan, part of the reason they're fighting there is a lack of natural resources, and as water runs out, this is going to be a problem.
But I think awarding the Peace Prize to somebody who's made a very eloquent and passionate argument on an environmental cause, it's kind of the wrong person to give it to. I think there should be another prize, maybe, for someone like Al Gore. I think that the problem for me with his film was...
They could give him the most amount of weight put on...
They could.
...since failing to become president.
Yes.
I mean, my theory is his worry about climate change has made him try to create his own ecosystem.
He's actually tiny, though, for where he comes from. He's from Tennessee.
Yeah.
He's midget.
But you believe that climate change is a threat and that human beings are affecting it adversely.
And that we should do something about it, but I don't believe we should lie, and I don't think we should exaggerate. No. I think there were a few things in that film which were picked up by us. You know, for example, Hurricane Katrina. I mean, that was an ordinary hurricane that hit an extraordinary target.
Yes, but, you know, the consensus is, or seems to be, that climate change has led to extreme weather patterns. And yes, it was a relatively ordinary hurricane that hit an extraordinary target. But these extreme weather patterns, I mean, the flooding we had over the summer and everything, you know, I mean, these things, I think, are linked. But scientists, by their nature, can't just say, this is definitely the case.
But it's interesting you mentioned the flooding over the summer, because, in fact, if you speak to climatologists and meteorologists, they say the pattern for Britain with climate change is drier summers, hotter summers and drier summers, and wetter winters. So actually this summer, with these amazing floods in Gloucestershire, bucked the trend of climate change.
There were some in the north as well, by the way.
Some.
They didn't make the news, they were too far away.
No. But this was kind of not what we expect with climate change. What we expect is a hot, dry summer like we had in '03. What we had this summer was a rather average summer in terms of temperature and a lot of rain. But unfortunately, what will then happen is some people will say, oh, this is climate change, this is global warming. So you end up with a situation where every time it's a little bit cold or a little bit warm, it's climate change. And that gives ammo to the out-and-out skeptics.
Indeed.
And I think that's a danger. And I think that was a bit of a danger with Al Gore's film. He made a film for Americans who really don't believe in climate change at all. And he had to hype it up to dramatise it.
Maybe not for our market. It is worth saying, by the way, that the case that was brought against the film was brought by interested parties who are funded by oil companies. But I'm sorry to say, because I could talk to you for hours, we're out of time. Michael, thank you very much indeed for being here. From the Daily Mail as well, if you see Melanie Phillips, tell her I really need to speak to her. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Hanlon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, obviously, we mentioned the climate debate there, but what do you, the public, think about climate change? Well, earlier, we went out onto the streets to find out.
Do what? Climate change? Climate bollocks, more like. It's your fucking Chinese, isn't it? I read a thing the other day, said for every bottle we recycle, your Chinese open 4 power stations, each. And there's a lot of them little buggers.
Global warming? What, shorts on Boxing Day? Grapes growing in the garden all year round, most of continental Europe underwater. If you can tell me what's wrong with that, you're a better man than me, Gungadin.
Oh my God, is this the BBC? Oh, cool. Okay, well, global warming, right? Well, I've heard that most of the heat escapes through your head. So maybe if people wear more hats? What? What's your problem?
Well, the important thing is to think about the children. Not for too long, like, you'll end up on that register. Don't forget that.
Yes, I would like to eliminate my carbon footprint completely, so I'm going to kill myself. Obviously, I won't put my head in the oven because it uses fossil fuels.
Well, I'm actually a professional tree planter. So what I do is, like, for every tree I plant, I offset that by taking a short-haul domestic flight. That all right?
Yeah, wait a minute. If you're asking me about the environment, I think the most important thing people can do is, like, stop having kids, you know? I got 7 kids, possibly 8, depends on the results of the Jeremy Kyle thing, you know? But, like, the best thing you can do for the environment is not have kids. You've got to save the planet for the children by not having them. Innit? Is it? The question?
In the interest of honesty, I should point out those were not genuine members of the public, in case you're a cretin who is thinking of phoning in. Now, this week, 1960s folk hero Donovan and the cult film director David Lynch went on Radio 4's Today programme claiming that transcendental meditation should be taught in our schools. A ridiculous idea? Well, to tell us, please welcome a very fine comedian indeed, Simon Evans.
Thank you.
Simon, transcendental meditation, really? Taught in our schools?
Well, I don't see why not. It sounds like an excellent thing. David Lynch, a world-renowned director and intellectual, pointed out on the Today programme that those who practice this could experience feelings of great bliss, at which point Ed Sturton, the presenter, quite openly laughed at him, chortled, sniggered, this is a man who accepts Tory health plans and budget cuts without so much as a smirk every morning. Just laughing, and I'm sorry, he said, what did he say? We don't do bliss on the Today programme. Well, I think they should do a bit of bliss. I'd like a bit of ecstasy wouldn't go amiss, certainly, would it?
Yes.
I'd love to see John Humphreys eat up of a morning and take a bit of that superfluous hostility out of him.
Or at least maybe on amyl nitrate, when he gets all aggressive.
Oh, you can almost whiff it, can't you?
So, transcendental meditation, I mean, do you practice yourself?
No, of course not. It's ridiculous. I have access to some very fine cognac. But we're talking about kids in state schools here. Most of them are turning to bubblegum-flavoured vodka at the age of 12 in order to try and shut out reality. I just think 20 minutes a day. Bit of transcendental meditation sounds like... I think you've got to cut to the core of the idea, really. I mean, he's putting a good gloss on it, but essentially all Lynch is saying is he's giving some opportunity for the teachers to get a bit of quiet time. Anyone who has ever professionally had to organise and deal with large groups of kids welcomes any framework within which they can be put in order to make them shut the fuck up. That's as simple as that, and that's all we're asking.
My teacher's bad enough as a parent.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got 2 children, so when the wife's out, I'm outnumbered.
Absolutely, yeah. Until I had children, I didn't know what the phrase "I need a break" means, really. Now, the most common words revolving in my head are "make it stop." That's all other way, but.
But, I mean, there are forms of meditation, aren't there? I mean, I remember as a child being made to play a game called Dead Lions or Sleeping Lions.
Sleeping Lions at birthday parties, which was essentially when the parents had had enough and wanted to have a few drinks.
Yes.
And the rules were lie down and pretend to be a sleeping lion. Sleeping anyway. How you were supposed to
I recall
evoke the lion, I don't know. You just lay there, essentially. You could move about quite a bit. They didn't give a damn. They just wanted you to shut up. You could... Till you either wet your knickers or...
Well, I remember playing that on my 6th birthday, and I was left there for nearly a month.
Yeah. And we had a couple of boys who were carpeted over at our place.
So not necessarily...
Luckily, it was a Hessian weave. They could breathe.
Yeah. Not necessarily
If that had been a waxback Staxminster, they would have been, I'm afraid, front page news.
They're not the worst idea in the world. So, transcendental meditation, I mean, just in summary, what would you say?
My mind's a complete blank. I've done it.
Oh, congratulations. There we are. Nirvana. Ladies and gentlemen, Simon F.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now to a new feature on the late edition, which I'm very excited about, entitled What, Why, How, Who? Well done. We will take a thorny, complex issue, and by applying these 4 trusty interrogatives, what, why, how, who, we hope to break it down and make it more digestible to the modern stomach. In addition to what, why, how, who, we'll feature a guest question, which this week is whither. Well done. This week's what, why, how, who is Iran's nuclear program. So, first question, what? What bloody fool gave the Iranians the idea they should have their own nuclear program? Answer, the United States. It's the usual story. In the 50s, Democratic leader deposed. Chum put in charge. Chum, chummy enough to be allowed nuclear proliferation. Chum gets kicked out. Other non-chums take over and fail to understand that as non-chums, they no longer have chum pedigree. Question 2. Why? Why does Iran want a nuclear program? Well, it's either Bush's position, they want it to threaten world peace, or the Ahmadinejad response. We need it powering long-life light bulbs, hybrid hatchbacks and special incubators for underweight puppies. I'm not sure I believe either of them. And so we turn to how. That one's actually copyright. How can the West justify finger-pointing when we have our own well-advanced nuclear programs? Easy, through a device known as distinguishing. Distinguishing is a crucial political skill, also known as, that's different, you see, because we're the goodies. And so, who? Who is Iran's new nuclear negotiator? His name's Saeed Jalili. Jalili has a PhD in political science. The title of his doctoral thesis was Paradigm of Political Thought of Islam in the Holy Quran, although perhaps more significant in hindsight was a school project he wrote aged 12 entitled Uranium, Our Shiny New Friend. And finally, our guest question, whither? Whither, Jalili? Leave that, it's rhetorical. And we'll have more What, Why, How, Who next week. That was brilliantly silly. I don't know why I bother with satire. That was the most fun I've ever had on this show. OK, now every author is on the lookout for a rip-roaring subject full of sex, violence and excitement, except one, because she is the biographer of David Cameron and William Hague. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome the dangerously pregnant Joanne Nadler. Joanne, hello, welcome. Thank you very much indeed for being on the show. Now, you are quite pregnant, I hope. Otherwise, I've made a massive faux pas immediately.
I'm just a beast, actually.
Oh, you're the statistic.
I'm
Excellent.
a statistic.
I'm glad. When's the baby due?
In about a month.
Oh, crikey,
And
we
if
really
you upset
are
me, it could be any moment now.
in the danger zone. OK, well, we've got some stirrups down here, so we can... I really don't want that to happen. I'm sorry I even mentioned
I'd be quite keen on it not happening, actually.
Yes,
But...
not yet. Still, it is live TV. It would be quite exciting. We're on BBC 4. It would bring in a lot of viewers. But anyway. So, now, David Cameron. I mean, who is he? What does he want? What's he after? What's his game?
Well, I mean, the quick answer to that is he wants to be Prime Minister. But he wants to be...
Yeah, but what does he really want? You know, something he's going to get.
Something he's going to get. Well, I mean, he's a lot closer to getting that now than he even was a month ago. I'm sure even you would agree with that.
Well, he was until Brown went, oh, Christ, no, they're doing well, cancel everything. And so now, you know, Brown's binned the election that he says he was never going to have.
He says he was never going to have it, even though he'd put about for several weeks that he might be having it. And
yeah.
He did seem to be very sort of defensive about the whole thing.
He did. He's quite defensive. And I have to say, David Cameron is on a roll. I've been watching him in Prime Minister's Question Time. He seems very confident. Ever since the conference, he's been really, really up.
Yeah, he has. And you can't blame him, really, because I think the Conservatives had been through a bit of a kind of stressful time over the summer. I mean, what he's been trying to do to the Conservative Party, to modernise it, to change the image, to really kind of overhaul it quite dramatically after what had been, you know, a decade of pretty disastrous poll results and, you know, going from one leader to another. They hadn't made enough of an impact. They hadn't sort of improved the state of the Conservative Party. He came in, he wanted to do something radical. That's always very difficult to do. I mean,
especially, frankly, in the Conservative Party, who, by their very nature,
are
conservative
yeah,
and
I mean,
keen
that's
to
exactly
conserve.
right. But if you look at what he was trying to do, pretty much from a standing start, because the previous opposition leaders just hadn't got a hold on it.
No.
And you described me as being the biographer of David Cameron. That's not strictly speaking
You're
correct.
working on a book.
But I was the biographer of William Hague, who was
Yes.
obviously the first leader when, well, I am the biographer of William Hague, who was the first leader when the party was initially in opposition.
Now, he was one of the bald two, wasn't he?
Yeah, and actually, he was very into transcendental meditation.
Was he really?
Indeed,
Is he still?
Yeah. Oh, well, I don't know whether he needs to meditate quite so much these days.
He's an interesting chap. I think he's probably the funniest politician in the House. I mean, I know they don't judge it, but I'm a comic, so...
Yeah. No, I mean, I think a lot of people said that he did have the capacity to be a stand-up comedian, and he certainly, he's very, very sharp, and his delivery sometimes is, you know...
He'd have been heckled pretty roundly, to be honest, at any gig, but he is a very funny guy. Now, the speech, this moment at the conference that seemed to turn the fortunes of the Conservatives round, 67 minutes of what David Cameron said was unprepared, you know, this is just me, I haven't written anything. I mean, he must have known the conference was coming up. Why? Why hadn't he written something?
Well, I think when they say they hadn't written something, I think you have to take that with a slight pinch of salt. I mean, he wasn't delivering it from a written script. And actually, you know, from a journalistic point of view, that is really refreshing, because if you go to a party conference or you go to any sort of media event where there's a politician, you will get the script of the speech that they're going to deliver, you know, generally the night before or sometime before it's delivered.
Excellent heckling opportunities.
Well, not necessarily, because, you know, actually what's really important in historical terms is what is it they actually are going to say on the day. And, you know, those nuances can come out, and you've got this script which may not be the final thing. So I think actually it was quite bold and brave of him to just stand up there without an auto cue, obviously with a few notes like a best man would have a wedding or whatever. And,
although
you know,
possibly not as blue. But I mean, that does seem to have been the moment where the Tories' fortunes have sort of changed. I was impressed with David Cameron when he first turned up, and I got to thinking about it, and here's a problem that I have with him. He's an Etonian, right? And now he's a Conservative. Do you think there was ever a moment where he questioned the politics he inherited as a kid? Because as an Etonian, you're a Conservative. You just are. Trust me, I know some Etonians.
You're certainly quite an establishment figure to start off with.
And a Conservative.
But I mean, it's not beyond the establishment to be of the left. And what sort of school did you go to?
Well, one very similar to Eton, only for children that are not as clever.
Right, and not as conservative. apparently.
No, very conservative, very conservative. But I sort of turned
But you're not a conservative.
Oh, God, no.
No. I'd rather gathered that.
turned the whole thing sort of on its head for me. I started to question political values. And I just worry that as an Exetonian, has there been a moment where David Cameron has proactively said, I believe in conservative values, this is what I really want to do?
I think if you look at his agenda for the Conservative Party, where he's come in talking about...
There isn't one yet, is there?
The environment, which is something you feel very strongly about.